Oscar winner Richard Dreyfuss, you've played a couple of villains in your career, but boy, the villain of all villains of recent time is Bernie Madoff. What attracted you to wanting to play him?
Well, it was an extraordinary role. I mean, it was a great story, which I knew basically, what the public knew about him when he confessed. And then I heard that they were making a film about it, and I wanted to play the guy. I wanted that part. We have some very large similarities in our background, so I felt that I could get him. I could do him.
Well, what was the key to that as you started to do your research and preparations? What ultimately was the key for you to get inside of him?
Actually, it was the play All My Sons by Arthur Miller. If you read that play or see it, you're seeing the story of Bernie Madoff's beginnings. And in the play, he gets a conscience and blows his brains out. In real life, he had no conscience, never blew his brains out, and proceeded to chuckle while he basically stole the future of every bat mitzvah girl in New York. And he stole their family's money without a second thought. And he did it really for the most hedonistic of reasons. You know, he did it just so he could have his shirts made in London and have a house or a yacht or something. And so,
well, I've heard different actors over the years talk about, when they're playing a villain or a bad guy. I mean, that person doesn't think of themselves as the villain or the bad guy. So how do you tap in from your angle of things that you can find to play that you actually like about the person?
Well, I like to tell young actors that inside of all of us is Hitler and Jesus. And you got to find the right balance of those things. And in your own life, no one can escape the fact that you are sooner or later incredibly selfish. You lay the blame on others when you know it's yours. You take more change than you are entitled to, and you take advantage, or you lie to the government, or you lie on your audit. And we all do those things. And that's where you find Bernie. You can find him right inside you. And it was not too difficult for me because I was raised in Bayside, Queens, and he was also raised in Bayside, Queens for a time. And he only lived 10 blocks away from where I had lived. And there was a great deal of common goals of all the young men on the street who had fought in the war and come back to get into business. And they wanted to get into any business. They wanted to get into business, period, and not solar panels and not grass growing. They wanted to get into business. And all the people that lived on my block shared that ambition with my dad and his friends, and Bernie too. When Bernie started out, he wasn't a criminal. When Bernie started out, he came up against a moment and he covered the loss with his own money. And he did that for a time, and then he realized that he could basically break the rules and do what he wanted. And they trusted him because he was sweet, comfortable, and menschy and funny. And he also said, this is an exclusive thing. You can't just join it, and everyone wants to join something they're told they can't join. And so that combination of things allowed people that had a little bit of money or a lot of money to join him and trust him.
I love you referred back to the younger, when he was getting started, because your son Ben plays that role. What was it like for you to see him playing a version of you on screen?
It was great. It was a lot of fun. Ben is actually an editor for Mother Jones magazine, but he had, you know, toyed with acting, and I asked him if he wanted to do this, and it was so right because he looks just like I did. So it was fun.
Has he got a taste of acting now? Does he want to do this more?
I hope not. I hope. I think he wants something else. I think, I'm not sure. I know that his younger brother, Harry, is a writer and director and an actor and like that. And Ben, I don't think he's going to be an actor. I think he's going to be a writer. But I could be wrong.
Well, another person you worked with us.
You'll have to ask him. You break up.
Let me click a button here. Maybe I can get it back on track. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, better.
Okay. Another person you got to work with in this movie, this miniseries, was one of the great actresses I think of all time, and that's Blythe Danner. What was she like to work with?
Blythe and I actually, I did my first play with her when she was 22 and had already won a Tony, and I was a supporting actor in a production of Major Barbara in LA, and then we worked together 20 years later doing plays at this summer theater place she goes to every summer. Every 20 years. So working with her is something I'm always look forward to. It's very comfortable. I'm going to try. Excuse me for 1 second. Can you get me a headset that I can hear better? Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. On the project itself, was there a particular scene or two that you just couldn't wait to play when you saw it in the script? You're like, oh, that's a juicy part of this movie.
Well, actually, when we Raymond DeFelita, he and I worked on the project together before we started. Goes in front of his grandchildren, and he talks the way he really feels, you know, talking about these guys he's going to eviscerate and strip their skin off in the same room with his family. It's so quiet, only the grandchildren could hear, and he knows they'll never remember or understand. And that was a scene I really liked doing.
I liked some of the silences you get to do when you're doing your negotiations. I was in advertising sales for many years, and that was a very good closing technique. After we'd presented everything, you know, you just sit across from the person. You never say a word, and I loved that about that part of the role.
Yeah, he was a tough nut, and he could be quiet. There's that scene where he and the guy are talking at the country club lunch, and he says to himself, and you hear him say, the first guy who talks loses, and he just shuts up until the other guy talks.
Oh, and when the other guy speaks, the big smile breaks out on his face.
Hopefully I can hear you through this.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, I don't think that's as good as, can you hear me better now?
I can hear you. I don't know that it's better.
Yeah, I've got good volume on you. That sounds good.
Yeah, this is better.
Okay.
This is better, and it looks better.
Well, you've won an Oscar, you've won a Golden Globe, but for some reason they haven't. You've not. Well, you haven't done a lot of TV projects, but you've not been up at the Emmy Awards before, and the voters have their ballots right now. What would that mean for you, if you got an Emmy nomination later this summer?
Well, what would it mean? It would be great. I had actually retired, and I had gone to England, and I was supposed to do the producers in London, and I told Mel Brooks when he asked me that I didn't know how to sing or dance, and he said, "Oh, who cares? You're funny." And I was fired 6 days before the first preview audience. I didn't know how to sing or dance. And I just decided to stay, and I was trolling in a way for work. And I wrote some articles. I wrote an article for the London Sunday Times. And then Oxford approached me and said, if you submit a to us, it will let you be a senior research advisor. And I submitted a project about civics, the absence of civics and the damage that was being done, and they liked it. And so for 4 years, I was at St. Anthony's College. And I didn't really expect to come back to Hollywood. But when I did, I had met my wife. I'd fallen in love with a great lady, and we came back, and there was a huge problem in the family. All of the money was gone, and I had to go back to work. It was the only way I knew how to make a living, was to act. So I started all over again. You know, when you're gone for 4 years, you're gone. Bye. And so I had to start all over with 1-day parts, 2-day parts, things like that. And so working my way back to Madoff meant a great deal to me. And I love what I do, but I'd loved it for 50 years, and that was enough. And I had other things I wanted to do. I wanted to get civics taught again in public schools. And I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I just couldn't afford it. So I'm doing it, but it's allowed because I'm back to work. So the better part I get is all to the good. If I can get an Emmy, that would be great.
Well, on your Oscar win, Goodbye Girl, 1977 movie, a couple of questions. One was, as you sat down that night, what were your expectations? Did you feel like it was going to happen? Was it a surprise? What was going through your mind?
I thought I was going to win it. And
I remember I was watching that ceremony back again a few days ago, and you took those steps pretty fast. I mean, you wanted up on that stage quickly.
There had been no thought when we did the film, which in itself spoiled me forever because it was so much fun to shoot the film. But there was no thought about awards or anything. And then I went on vacation with my girlfriend, and my agent called and said that I had been nominated for Best Actor. And I said immediately, who else was nominated? And he said, Richard Burton, Marcello Mastroianni, Woody Allen, and John Travolta. And I said, I'm going to win. Don't ask me how I knew that.
Well, there's been long been a rumor that, and maybe you can confirm or deny, but Richard Burton was up a lot of times and never won. And when they said Richard, he was like halfway up out of his seat thinking he had won. That's not true?
No, it's not true. Because what Stallone did was to say, the new world champion, Richard Dreyfuss. And he, boom, like that. There was no time for Burton to make that mistake. And he didn't.
Did you chat with any of those men afterwards or later on about that night?
No, as a matter of fact, for someone who I was absolutely sure I was going to win, I had a certainty about it. I didn't prepare my remarks. I didn't think it through. And so when I won and turned around and looked at the audience, my mind went completely frozen. I didn't know what to say or who to thank or what was going on. So that's why it was kind of cut short.
Well, before we started, I love the story you told. Where did you keep your Oscar for the longest time?
I have kept it mostly in my refrigerator because I am proud of it. I thought it was too kind of self-serving to put a focused light on it. But I wanted everyone to know that I'd won it. So I figured sooner or later they'd always open their refrigerator and they'd see it. And that's what I did.
It would have always a nice light shining on it as soon as they open the door, too.
Yeah, well, it's the same light that's on the eggs.
And then you got a nomination almost 20 years later for Mr. Holland's Opus. And I've got to say, my coworker at the office, that is one of his top 2 or 3 films of all time. He just loves Mr. Holland's Opus. What was it like coming back after all those years and being a nominee again?
It was great to be nominated. I'm very, very, very proud of that film. I knew I was not going to win, and I didn't expect to win, but I was enjoying the evening. I had spent, I guess, the second half of the 70s and early part of the 80s, I was at the Oscars all the time. And then it just got a little old, you know. It stopped being fun, and so I stopped going. But then when I got nominated, I went. I remember, though, that I had an absolute certainty that I was not going to win this time. So it didn't bother me.
And I believe, if I haven't looked at that in a long time, but on the red carpet, I think you had one of your sons. Maybe he was like 12 or 13 or something at the time. That was really nice.
As a matter of fact, I had my 2 kids were with me. My daughter was about 13, I guess, and in the middle of a tribute that Steven Spielberg was making for Christopher Reeve. And everyone was hushed. And Steven was at the dais. And all of a sudden, ring, ring. And it's the last thing on earth that you want to have, you know, certainly at that kind of solemn moment. And it was from my daughter's phone. And I looked at her. If I could have taken her head off with my eyes, I would have. And she grabbed for the phone, and it was her nanny calling to say, asking if she was having fun. So that was a heavy, great part of the evening.
Well, one question I've got for you, I've asked this of so many Oscar voters over the years, Oscar winners and nominees and so forth. I would love to get your take on it. I know you love the craft of acting and actors and the whole profession. When you've got your ballot in front of you, what on any given year, what are you thinking about? What kind of performance really strikes you that makes you want to vote for them?
You know how people vote? I'll tell you how actors vote. Actors vote for their friends first and the best performance second. If they don't know the actors involved, then it's the best performance of the 5. But if their best friend is nominated, they're going to vote for the best friend.
And what for you, let's say you don't have a good friend in that category on a particular year or a particular category. What is a best performance for you? What are you looking for?
I don't know how to parse that. There's something about certain actors who, like Jeff Bridges, for instance, is an actor who in my vision, Jeff has exploded into an enormous talent that he had perhaps had all the time and had never let out. And now, whenever you watch a film with Jeff, you don't know what you're going to get, but it's going to be big and exciting. And that's one thing I look for. And the other thing is, do I believe what the people are doing? Do I believe them? So there are certain people, certain actors that you just are in favor of. You know, you're always looking for. And now an actor's performance is so tied to a writer's ability to write dialogue. And now there are very few scripts written with good dialogue. And it's more special. Actors aren't asked to do what they used to be asked to do. So there are always good performances, but a lot of it, I'm not going to say it doesn't hold up. It's just that I wish that the writing was better, or that the director understood that he needed good dialogue in his film.
Well, you've had a ton of great films. When you meet a fan for the first time, or somebody out on the street or at the restaurant, can you tell what movie they're going to bring up? Do you know which one? I've had people tell me just by the look in somebody's eye or maybe their age, they know what film they're about to mention.
Actually, there is one film. Let It Ride. I immediately say, you are a depraved gambler. And that's what they are. And that's what I say. Anyone who brings up Let It Ride is an unbelievable gambler. And it's kind of it's become iconic or totemic, whatever the word is. And there are others. There is nothing better or more sincere when you're walking down a street in a city, when some lady who could be 80 years old or 50 or 30 or 20, whatever, walks up to you and says, "Thank you," and walks away. That's the best compliment an actor can possibly get. And it's something that they don't say to their own divorce lawyers or neurosurgeons or rabbis or ministers. They say it to actors, because actors, I have been on stage in a comedy where we made people laugh so much that people in the audience looked lag. You know, their skeletal frame was going one way and their skin was going another. They were hysterical. And that's a great gift. It's a mitzvah that not only can you make them laugh, you can them of the pain they carry at all times and don't know it. And that's the great thing about a great comedy. I did this Sly Fox, Larry Gelbart's Sly Fox on Broadway in 2004. And there were 17 brilliant comic actors in that show. I mean, brilliant. And we made people laugh so much they wanted to spill their milk through their nose.
Well, that would be me in the theater watching, or at home watching What About Bob? I mean, that movie is one of probably your best comedy you ever did in terms of a film.
Yeah. I probably get more comments about that and Jaws are the two films that get most comments.
And speaking of Jaws, my uncle took me to see Jaws at like age 8, and my parents still do not forgive him. That movie scared me to death.
Yeah, that's too young.
That was too young.
Yeah, although I will say that I'm quite a bit older than that, and was when I shot it, and I would never, ever walk into the water from the beach. Just walk in, you know, forget it. Not being able to see what's below half of my body.
Well, that's got to be.
Free. I'm willing to scuba dive. That I'll do because I can see everything. And I've seen sharks. But to walk in and not know what's there,
Well, imagine the people that see Richard Dreyfuss walking on the beach or walking into the ocean or going scuba diving, and that's got to be quite an experience for them after watching Jaws.
Yeah, and it's really rare.
Well, one last question. I think I saw you a couple of weeks ago when I was over at the AFI tribute to John Williams. What's it like when you gather in a room with a George Lucas or a Steven Spielberg or other people like that you've worked with?
It's great. It's a lot of fun to speak to John and George and Steven at the same time. I remember when we did Jaws, Steven said to me once, "Do you want to hear the score?" And I said, "Has he written it yet?" And Steven said, "No, he hasn't." And he brought me into his office and he played separate cuts of Vaughan Williams and forgetting the names now of the composers, but he played me 3 different cuts, and I heard the score. I knew what the score was going to be. And John, at one point, I was at the Boston Pops with him, and he decided to prove to the audience how important the music was, and he showed 15 minutes of Jaws with no music, and it was a big snore. And then he put the music on, and the same material scared the hell out of people.
Yeah, I think he's the best American composer of all time. Every movie he tackles is great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, as you mentioned about the lady or ladies that will just say simply thank you. That's what I'll say as we close up. Thank you for. I've been watching you since I was a little kid, and you made us laugh and cry and everything in between. So thank you for that and for talking with us today.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.